Chapter 15. The Quest for Live Food. A major challenge in our new relationship involved food. Shadow couldn't seem to get over the habit of eating cat food. When I was out of the house or in the middle of the night while I slept, he'd sneak into the kitchen and open a can of Friskies from the cupboard. Shadow knew this habit disturbed me, so he tried to hide the evidence, but I'd still smell proof in the trash or on his breath. Shadow also ate kibble out of the bag, sometimes right in front of me, grabbing a handful and eating the little nuggets one by one, like popcorn, while we talked. At least this didn't give him bad breath, even if it got on my nerves. One day, I decided to challenge him. "I'm puzzled by something," I said. "Tell me," he said. "We can find the answer on my laptop." "I don't think so. I'm puzzled about why you continue to eat cat food." He shrugged. "I like it." I shook my head. "But you made such a point of telling me how the outdoor cats made fun of indoor cats for eating dead food." I had chosen the expression "make fun of" very carefully. "Yes, but who cares what outdoor cats think?" "Well," I said, "that's fine then. It's just that men don't eat cat food." I said the last part as he turned his back on me and walked away, but apparently he was listening. I woke up the next morning to the loud closing of the downstairs door. It was early for Shadow to be going out, I thought, but as his footsteps on the stairs quickly told me he was coming in. Of course, I couldn't help but wonder where he'd been, and for how long. He'd been sleeping when I came to bed, but that was hours ago. By the time I finished washing up, Shadow was busy shuttling back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room table. "I got us some breakfast," the man of my dreams said, as proudly as if he'd hunted it down or harvested it himself. "How nice, Shadow," I said, grossly understating my pleasure. On the table was a very large crystal bowl. I kept it on the top shelf so I wouldn't use it every day, but Shadow was so much taller than I am, he wouldn't have understood the significance of its placement. For that matter, I suppose, he wouldn't understand the significance of crystal, its expense, its fragility. But what caused my delight was the contents of the bowl. Berries and peaches, white and yellow, I guessed. Why are you guessing the colors? But what caused my delight was the contents of the bowl. Berries and peaches, white and yellow, I guessed. And a melon whose sweetness you could almost smell 18 inches away. It makes no sense why she's guessing the color. Is she colorblind? I don't even know. Okay. "Let me get a knife," I said, thinking fruit salad and failing to notice the expression on Shadow's face. Of course, on my return trip, it was impossible to miss. Shadow was standing between me and the table, looking as though he would rather die than let me touch anything. "What's the matter?" I asked. "It's live food," he said, then gestured at the knife. "You're going to kill it with that knife." "Live food?" "Yes," he said. "The sign at the store said this was organic. The dictionary says that means belonging to a living organism." "Yes, but not living now," I said. His face was skeptical. "Everything we eat was living at one time or another," I explained as gently as I could. "Except maybe tofu." "Well, I think that's just rude to tofu." "So you wait until food dies before you eat it?" he said. "Why isn't that a question?" "That should be a question." "Well, actually, we probably wouldn't eat something that died on its own unless we were very hungry. We'd kill it first, then eat. But that sounds a bit more grisly than putting a well-sharpened knife into a melon," I said, moving past him. "Fruits and vegetables only live when they're connected to the ground by stems and roots. By the time they get to the store, much less the table, they've technically been dead for a while, although I don't think anyone knows exactly what life is like for a melon. In any case," I went on, "I promise that there'll be no screaming or squirming when I slice into this melon," I said. "Anyway, its skin is too thick to eat it any other way." Shadow seemed to consider. "I'll try the melon. Go ahead and kill it. I inserted the knife, cut a slice, and handed it to him. It was lovely to see the delight that spread across his face as the juicy fruit released its flavor in his mouth. Wow. Yes, I said, taking a slice for myself. Definitely wow. Shadow went through half the melon by himself, along with a peach and a dozen or so strawberries. For myself, I managed to slice a peach, without any further outcry from him, and I alternated it with slices of melon. The flavors intensify each other, I've always thought, and the berries were like little exclamation points. I saw a future in which Shadow ate fruit and vegetables like other people, a future in which we could eat out, maybe even go to Amelia's house for dinner, or have guests in. The quest was not over, however. One afternoon Shadow came flying up the stairs, hollering. "I found live food!" he said, grabbing a jacket for me and pulling me by the hand down the stairs. "Live food!" he kept repeating. That's what I want for dinner." As soon as he headed for Clement Street, I had an idea of what must have happened. Walking on Clement Street is like walking through a city in Asia, though not as crowded. When I shop at Clement Street, I feel like a foreigner, particularly at stores like the seafood place where Shadow and I finally came to a stop. It seems that Chinese people share Shadow's passion for live food, or at least food that's recently dead. Not long ago, there was quite a political controversy about the conditions in which Chinatown markets kept their creatures while they wait to be stir-fried. Most of the fuss was about some little birds or other, kept in tiny, unclean cages until they were quickly killed and taken home for cooking. The controversy died down when it got around to live crabs, like the ones that lay in 3 or 4 layers at the bottom of a large glass tank in the window in front of us. It was hard to imagine these creatures experiencing mental anguish in any way that humans could recognize. Who could sympathize with a crab? And yet, that's exactly what I found myself doing. I could almost hear their cries as one crab's leg pushed into another crab's eye. They all seemed to be trying to get out of the glass, apparently not understanding that it was as solid as steel. That is not true at all. It is solid as glass. Just don't use an analogy if it does not make a goddamn piece of sense. There was no escape. I looked up at Shadow, but I found no empathy for other creatures in that face. "Dinner," he said. "I checked on the web. They're food. You can have one for your own if you like. I usually buy my crab at Calmart." "Wow," I told Shadow. "They've got the crabs all cooked and cleaned and ready to go. You can eat them right out of the paper if you want to." Shadow shook his head. "I don't want them cooked. I want to bring them home alive and kill them myself. The web tells you how." There was a gleam in his eye as he said this. "Come on," he said. "I'll wait here." Shadow passed through the invisible wall of fishy smells at the store's doorway and disappeared inside. In a minute or two, he appeared over the tank full of crabs, with a middle-aged Chinese man at his side wearing a white apron and a small sort of white cap. The man lifted a lid I hadn't noticed off the tank, and he began poking at the crabs with his finger. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but he and Shadow appeared to be having quite a conversation. In a minute, Shadow had pushed his sweatshirt sleeve above his elbow, and he too was handling the creatures, apparently looking for the perfect fellow to bring home. I couldn't watch. A few minutes later, Shadow emerged with his crabs in a plastic sack that had a little water on the bottom. "Dinner," he said proudly. The web recipe Shadow had downloaded suggested preparing the crabs, all right, killing them, in a savory broth, as if the aromas of herbs and spices, or maybe the wine, would make being cooked less painful. I got down my stock pot and filled it with the remainder of a bottle of Chardonnay. It had been in the refrigerator too long to be drinkable anyway. With NPR on the radio and the brewing liquid beginning to smell quite appetizing, I pithed and grated an orange peel, stuck cloves in the remaining orange, measured spices, opened chicken broth and clam juice. Well, I've always loved cooking. When the broth was ready to simmer, I carried the dishes and silverware to the table. I got some lettuce and washed it, then made a simple lemon vinaigrette. It suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't seen the man of my dreams since we came home. Worse still, I hadn't seen the crabs. I found all of them in the bathroom. Shadow was sitting on the edge of the tub, looming over the crabs as they skitter along the floor of the tub, looking, no doubt, for a way to escape this madman. Shadow? I couldn't phrase a question. He looked up with a strange light in his eye, almost wild. Are you going to eat? He asked. Actually, at that moment, I had no appetite at all. Maybe I'll have a glass of wine first. The pot is ready when you are. I didn't watch Shadow make the kill. Apparently, the website had also told him how to clean and prepare the crabs for eating, my appetite refreshed by the aroma. I enjoyed the dinner quite a lot, and so did Shadow, but I'm not sure that even the crab satisfied his curiosity about live food. 2 or 3 days later, I passed through the park on my way home from picking up some groceries. I had passed through the dog run without incident and was walking beside some low-growing shrubs near a wooded path when a creature bolted out of the undergrowth into my path and stopped short and stared at me. "Shadow!" I exclaimed without thinking. He looked so much like my old cat, the same lush dark fur, the same green eyes, but a wilder look in them, and I noticed that something very much like blood had splattered the lighter gray fur on his chest. I walked on. After all, the cat who had been Shadow was now a man waiting in my flat for me to arrive home. I made an extra loop of the park to calm myself. As I climbed the stairs, I heard the shower. When he came out, Shadow said he was actually tired and would be going to bed early. "Without supper?" I asked. He nodded, just the hint of a smile acknowledging my concern for him. "I'm not hungry," he said, and perhaps he wasn't. I hesitated, but it had to be said. "When we agreed that you would be a man, Shadow, I said that you would need to be a man all the time. Do you remember?" "Of course," he said, giving me a hug. "For you, I will always be a man." Although David often says I have managed to remain naive in midlife, and of course, he doesn't mean that kindly, I saw the potential for evasion in his pledge. However, I decided to accept his word and forget what I had seen. It might, after all, have been a cat who merely resembled my shadow. As Sally had said, you choose to love. Shadow, who always kept with an enviable peace, who always slept with an enviable peace, was restless that night. Somewhere in the middle hours he left our bed. I found him at the window, staring into the park, but I said nothing. The next morning he was still not his usual self. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace. "I feel, well, strange, like not sitting." "Restless?" I offered. He nodded. "But more than that. In my cat's body." He looked around him, finally spotting what he wanted in the corner, almost hidden behind the TV. "I could always use this when I was feeling whatever it is I'm feeling." He held the scratching post in one hand like a trophy. "Now it doesn't help me." He threw it down onto the couch. "I used to think you used the scratching post to relieve stress. You know, when you were upset with me or something didn't go right," I suggested, in a tone I hoped would be soothing. "What is this stress?" he asked. Actually, I was feeling a little stressed myself, so the description came easily. "Well, of course you're restless, and your stomach feels funny, like you're hungry, but you're probably not. Your neck is tight, inside and out. Sometimes your arms feel achy or tired. It's something like being afraid, only there's nothing to be afraid of." Shadow was still pacing, so I reached more deeply into my bag of psychobabble. They say stress is usually caused by conflict or ambivalence. Sometimes you want two things and you can't have them both, and you don't know which one you want more. His face brightened. "That's it," he said, coming back to the table. "I'm feeling stress. So, how do I get rid of it? Are there bigger scratching posts for people to use?" Actually, people use exercise machines in a lot the same ways that you use your scratching post. What's an exercise machine? And just that simply, the spare bedroom, which was no longer used as a place to stash Shadow when gentlemen callers came by, was converted into a gym with a weight machine and a treadmill.